Let's face it, business technology is frustrating and complex. So how do you make sure it works for your team? To make IT right, start the discussion at go-domain.com. You're listening to Discussions by Domain, a podcast for business leaders. Our discussions may be with people you've probably heard of before, but the majority of our guests are in the trenches, professionals like you and I, with the same challenges and struggles of keeping up in the Northeast. They're implementing strategies, overcoming hurdles. They're leading the fastest growing businesses in our region. My name is Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships at Domain Computer Services, and the host of this show. When I'm not talking with business leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of Domain and the ups and downs of our own growth journey, as we intend to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
So today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about identifying, protecting, and governing your data no matter where it lives. In today's world, it's extremely important to protect your sensitive data, and the reason for that is there's more risk to your data than ever before. Compliance is one of those risks that revolve around the need to protect sensitive data. Managing compliance in today's world is a very extremely complex and time-consuming and labor-intensive activity to do for most organizations, no matter how large or how small. Organizations spend a lot of resources tracking regulatory changes, auditing and testing of controls, preparing for reports, and showing the effectiveness of those controls that they have that make up their compliance program. Insider risk is also one of those risks that affect your data, your sensitive data these days. Insider risk is consistently rated as one of the top risks for CISOs around the world, and it has been one of the top risks for many, many years. And the reason for that is insider risk is extremely difficult to manage. The reason it's extremely difficult to manage, it's very difficult to identify. Some examples of insider risks that kind of make up this bubble are things like confidentiality violations, leakage of sensitive data or data spillage, or better known as data breaches in today's media terms, intellectual property theft that occurs either internally or via espionage, sabotage, fraud, insider trading, regulatory compliance violations, and workplace harassment. Those are all many of the risks that make up insider risk that affect your organization and can potentially affect the privacy and security around your data. This is a quote here from Satya Nadella, our CEO, and as many of you know, COVID-19 was very impactful for many organizations, requiring the shift to working remotely. This came as a surprise to many organizations. They weren't prepared for this type of a shift to occur, and because of that, the occurrence and the move to the getting employees productive as quick as possible was the primary focus when we went to this remote work. After that occurred, a lot of organizations then had to go back and start looking at, okay, we got our employees up, they're productive now, they're working from home or wherever it happens to be. But then they started getting questions like, okay, how are we protecting those business critical data that exists, or that sensitive data across all of the different apps and endpoints and cloud services that are out there that our employees are using to work remotely? So a lot of organizations struggled to get to that point and are still in that point right now. But the ones that have completed that then started asking the question around, okay, now that we've got our employees working productive remotely, we've worked on securing their business critical data and applications. Have we done all of this in a compliant manner? Have we violated our internal compliance policies? Have we violated our external compliance policies? Are we in compliance with any regulations that drive our business? And again, that's where a lot of the organizations are right now, are still trying to wade through this, because as we've seen with this rapid move to working remotely, a lot of organizations are starting to view this as more of a permanent way to work. So these are true challenges that people are trying to work through around their data. Now, when we start talking about data, the data landscape has gotten extremely complex. One of the interesting statistics that came out about 6 months ago was that 90% of data ever created has been created in the past 2 years. Now, think about that for a moment. That is an amazing statistic. 90% of the data ever created has been made in the past 2 years. If you look at any of the graphs of data over time, it looks like a hockey stick, like you would want your stock portfolio to look like. It is absolutely amazing the amount of data that is creating. And this is occurring because of technology. Technology has allowed us to have massive and cheap storage. So we can not only create data, we can store data. We've got artificial intelligence and machine learning to apply analytics to data. So data has been a key principle for most businesses, and businesses want to collect data, and they want to collect data that's considered sensitive data, maybe on their customers, as a core part of their business. So in all of this, we've got this data exploding, being created at record numbers. Then we've got this other impact that's occurring where we've got our regulatory environments. We're getting data is something that's considered a power in many ways, and government agencies around the world are trying to help with protecting that data of consumers, data of sensitive operations, and they're creating regulatory regulations in bodies that are having impacts on this exploding data. So you've got two crazy things that are going on right now. You've got this massive amount of data, you've got all these regulations that are coming at forcing protections to protect that data in the appropriate ways. And then within your own organizations, you've got the issue of data is no longer inside your walls of your business or your corporation. Data is everywhere. Data is going into the cloud. It's going into third-party SaaS applications. You're sharing data with vendors and partners like you never have before. Data is being utilized on endpoints that you no longer control, either at someone's own personal home or on their own personal mobile devices. And you might be using multiple cloud SaaS-based applications as part of your data. So you've got this triad of things that have made a ever increasing and very complex data landscape like we've never seen before. And a lot of organizations are struggling with keeping up with how do we get a handle on that. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, is how we do that. So the first key step in trying to get a handle on this crazy data landscape is to understand the data landscape. And the first step and the most important step within this process is to know your data. You need to understand where your data resides at, where your data is being created, and what is the data. You have unstructured data, you have PII, you have confidentiality data, you've got intellectual property, and you've got your typical mundane data that exists. So, what is all of that data, and what is important to you from a company, and where is that data being created? Is it being created in emails? Is it being created in chats? Is it Word documents? Is it knowledge management systems? You need to look across your landscape and identify what is most important to you and where it's created. After that, you move to the next step, which is protecting your data. And protecting your data is where you take your data classification policies that you have created internally within your company based off of the data that you know you have. So now you've identified what is sensitive data, what data is worth protecting in your organization. And then how you take those policies that are created on pen and paper and apply those in a way that you can protect your data is through the application of labels to data. So once you apply your labels to data, which are generally based off of your data classification policy, this is where we can start using our tools within information technology to apply security measures such as encrypting or watermarking or restricting access to that data. The third triad that we start looking at within understanding the data landscape is governing your data. And this is where you start taking additional controls in order to protect your data. This is where you can do things like data loss prevention to try to prevent your sensitive data from leaving a place that you have it restricted, making sure that people only have access to data when they need that data. And then most importantly, governing the life cycle of the data. And outside of the first area, identifying your data, which a lot of corporations have trouble with, almost all corporations have problems with the life cycle of data. We do a very bad job historically of getting rid of data after we no longer need it or it's served its useful purpose. We like to hoard data and collect data and keep it and put it in data stores when it's no longer has a value. So making sure that you have a appropriate data life cycle around your data so that you are removing that data when it's no longer effective is very important to your program. And then at the bottom and the foundation for all of this is making sure that you're employing intelligence that's now available to all three of these areas. And that is artificial intelligence and machine learning to utilize to help you find your data and know where it's at, to help you protect your data and to help you with that governance of data. When we talk about security, humans are the number one weak point within data. And if humans aren't appropriately finding the data and classifying the data for you, then you have weak spots within your data protection program. When we talk about knowing your data, what do I really mean about knowing your data? And that is truly identifying out of all the data within your organization, what kinds of data are the most sensitive that I have in the organization, because that's the data that you want to spend most of your efforts on protecting, because that's the data that is most critical to your data operations. You also then need to, as I mentioned earlier, decide where does that data live? Does that data live in a repository within an application that we can secure? Is it in a data lake? Is it in a collaboration tool? Where is that data, and documenting that data and documenting the flows of that data? And that's really important, is how is your data being shared and accessed? As we work on more and more collaboration tools, we have more and more ways to share and collaborate. And with that, data now is going many different places. And again, those places are generally outside of your company. They're going to applications maybe you don't control. They could be consumer-based applications, and they could be going to endpoints that you may or may not control. And diagramming those data flows of the sensitive data is very important for your security organization to be able to work on protecting that data. When we talk about protecting the data, as I mentioned before, we're really talking about applying labels to help identify that sensitive data. And this can be done in multiple ways. It can be done manually, where a user creates a label and puts a label on the data it was just created, aka Mark, I create a Word document and I label that document a certain classification. It could be automatic labeling, where you have, again, a tool, artificial intelligence, machine learning, that says, hey, this document Mark created looks like it could be confidential information. I'm going to label it automatically as confidential information. It's also labeling data in all states that data exists. Data exists at rest, in use, and in transit. You need to make sure that you're applying labels to that data in all three of those states as it's being used. You want to make sure that your labels are extensible. In other words, can they be read by other systems and other programs? And this becomes really important from a security standpoint. Let's say you have a third-party data loss prevention tool that you want to utilize to help protect your data. You need to make sure that that tool can understand and read the data labels that you're applying to your data. You want to make sure those data labels are customizable, because not every organization has the same data classification systems, and it's not a one-size approach works for all. You want to make sure that the data labels follow your data so that it can travel with your data when it's in all three of those states of transit, whether it's in transit, use, or at rest. And generally that's done using by applying a label within metadata. And you want to make sure that you have protection policies that are in place, so your third-party protection tools or your in-house protection tools can act upon those labels and protect that data as appropriate based off of your policies. When it comes to governing the data and data loss prevention in particular, it comes down to how can I protect my sensitive data? And this can be in many different ways. You can encrypt your data, you can put access restrictions on your data, you can use tools such as data loss prevention to prevent the data from going from one place where you know that it's at, you know that it's protected, to some place where you might not know or might not have those same levels of protection. You also then get into this area where you got to balance kind of that data security and the productivity. You need to control access to that data so that only the people that need to see that data have access to it, but you need to make those people productive. So you need to give people ways to be able to share that data appropriately and extend the permissions of that data to others so that that way they can access it and use it and continue to help keep a healthy workplace and a productive environment. And then one of the larger challenges after you figure all this out, you need to figure out, okay, if I've got a system that contains critical data or sensitive data within my organization, I've got protection around that. How do I start to scale all three of these processes and procedures across my whole digital estate? So how do I do this at large and scale? And that can be a challenge in many, many different ways for organizations. So you kind of start off tough with trying to find my data, and then scaling your protection and your controls becomes another challenge towards the end. So when you think about your strategy for protecting and managing your data, there's really three questions that you need to ask yourself. And those questions are, do I know where the data lives? And I sound redundant saying this over and over, but I want you to understand this is the single most important thing that you can do, is understanding where data is created and where it's residing. Because no matter how good of a data protection and governance program you have in place, if data is being created or data is residing outside of those boundaries, you're putting your data protection plan at risk. You need to make sure that you have control of the data as it travels inside and outside your organization. Data now wants to be free. People are using it in multiple ways with multiple tools, and you need to make sure that protection of that data continues to follow that data no matter where it goes. And then finally, are you using multiple solutions to classify, protect, and label your data? Organizations are very complex. Organizations have very many tools that might touch and handle sensitive data. Are all of those solutions working together and appropriately? Are those solutions effective at their measures of what they're doing? Because as we know in security, when you talk about the chain, the weakest link, that goes into place with your multiple solutions that you may have. You want to make sure that they're all as strong as each other, or else you'll have a weakness, and that weakness can create a insecurity within your system. At Microsoft, when we talk about compliance and all of this around identifying, protecting, and governing your data, we do this within Microsoft 365 compliance. And within Microsoft 365 compliance, we really have four pillars that we operate under for our solutions that exist there. The first pillar is around information protection and governance. So this is protecting and governing that data wherever it lives at. The second pillar is insider risk management, and this allows you to identify and take action on critical insider risk that may exist within your organization. The third pillar is discover and respond. So this allows you to quickly investigate and respond with the relevant data as needed from a compliance standpoint. And then finally, compliance management. And this is one of the underlying foundations across the M365 compliance platform. And this is really the compliance manager tool. And what it allows us to do is to help you try to simplify compliance and reduce risk within your environment by tracking those regulatory controls and looking at your environment and helping provide the correct insights to help keep you in compliance with those regulatory controls that may have an impact on your business. With that, I think we're at an end of the presentation, and I think we're ready to turn it over to Anthony for a panel discussion. Anthony?
Very good, Mark. Thank you so much for that. I'm glad we didn't get any internet interruptions there. You did a phenomenal job and provided a lot of insight. With that being said, I wanted to let all the guests know and people on this presentation know that you can ask any type of question that you may be thinking or have specific to your organization or an organization that you know of. And you can do that at the top of your screen. You'll see a little comment type of box. It'll say show conversation. You can go in there and the Del Strauss and myself will be monitoring those questions and we'll be able to ask the panelists for the remainder of this presentation. So I'm going to take this time now to introduce the other individuals that are on this call that are in the background, and we'll bring them to the front of the presentation here. We have James Matola. He is the Vice President of Data Privacy and Investigations at Porzio Compliance Services, which is a subsidiary of Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman. James's claim to fame is he spent 25 years with the Secret Service and leading their cybersecurity teams both out of New York City and Newark, New Jersey. So Jim, welcome.
Thank you.
The individual we have on the call is part of the domain and tier 1 cybersecurity team and leads that team. His name is Mc Mcquillen, and he looks across our entire organization from both geographic perspectives, both out of the Baltimore region and the New Jersey, New York region, at all of our clients and the solutions that we put into place with them. So Nick, welcome to the call as well.
Thank you.
So the first question that I have is I wanted these individuals to provide, with their years of experience, some stories of not only insider risk, but also data privacy. So Jim, I think I'm going to start with you. Is there an insider risk, compliance, or data privacy war story that you have from your time in this industry?
Yeah, you know, it's the timing of this couldn't be better. I really think that 2020 is kind of the year of fraud, and yep. What when we had this initial discussion, I kind of went back and I've got a lot of stories, but we don't have all the time in the world. But I think it really, for me, it breaks down into what I see working with mid-sized businesses or some businesses that are even in the upper market, as well as nonprofits and with schools and whatnot. Is that I kind of see three kind of tiers. One, which I like to call internal IT as a risk. The second one, which is your basic disgruntled employee. And the third one is an opportunistic insider. What we've seen in internal IT as a risk are things that are just so very basic, like cyber hygiene, good administrative policies, patching, upgrading end-of-life systems, things like that, right? Or giving admin control to users on their own machines. What happens here is you've got a lot of data exfiltration, ransomware issues, and data breaches, right? So, case in point, one of the companies we work with in a ransomware issue, 250 folks who basically were not able to do their job because of a ransomware issue. One of the weak administrative controls was a password that was basically 2 characters. So, it's very simple things like this. And then again, another case that we worked involved forwarding rule for emails that were, over 30,000 emails were sent out because that user's credentials had been compromised. In both these cases, right, on the IT as a risk, these were preventable, avoidable, and they created a huge compliance and regulatory issue, because now we're getting into data breach regulation notification, and in some cases we have to hire, not only companies to help mitigate these problems and get services back up and running, but then we've got to figure out what happened and whose data has been exfiltrated, what jurisdiction do they fall under, and how do we make those notifications? So it's really, these are problems that could have been avoided. So there's a couple stories there. Disgruntled employees, their motivation could be a whistleblower, or it could be a situation where they're going to be themselves, terminated at some point. So they send emails to themselves with company information. They stick thumb drives in laptops before they leave. Again, it's data exfiltration. These events in some cases become data breaches. I don't care if it's 15 W-2s. It's a data breach, right? So you think about all the time, all the remediation, all the things that can be done. I know that Mark was talking about data loss prevention tools. It's those types of things that you need to look at. And then the third one is really the opportunistic insider, which is stealing time, stealing money, manipulating Excel spreadsheets, sending money to yourself in different types of transfers. So there's a lot of ways, but I have to tell you that every investigation that I work deals with data, right? And it's data privacy, data classification, data control, administrative controls, technical controls, physical controls. So to protect the names of the innocent and the guilty here, kind of have to be careful. But it's just, again, this is an ongoing issue where cyber hygiene, data privacy policies, regulations, adherence to governance and control would probably prevent a lot of this from happening. And in a lot of cases, someone saw it because they decided to take another look, do an audit. They had a feeling something didn't look right. And that's really kind of something that it should be a little bit more proactive in the way that they're looking at things, rather than, looking for the smoke and then finding the fire.
Yeah, so Jim and I and the entire domain team, at least here in New Jersey, have worked on assessments and audits and brought into all types of investigations with Jim and his team across the state of New Jersey, New York City. And we're talking small organizations as small as 2 to 3 people, all the way up to larger organizations and even nonprofits of 200, 500 end users, with both the insider risk of internal IT and also outside third parties. So I always like to make it very clear that it can be a 2-person company, it could be a 500-person company. You could have internal IT, you may have an outside third party. We've seen it all, and these all of the things that we're talking about apply to organizations of all sizes. Nick, I'm going to transition over to you and see if we can get your insider risk compliance story, and with a caveat that over the last couple of days, I'm sure a lot of people on this call, if you're attending this call, you've probably seen the national news on the Solarwinds breach that has occurred from what it looks like to be Russian state actors, and the breaching of about 18,000 companies and organizations, including government organizations. So Nick, I know I hit you with a couple emails over the last 2 days and looking into this and giving some thoughts. So I don't know if that's the way you wanted to go, but it is very relevant as of today. If not, take it in the direction you were going to go before we got on this call.
No, that's very relevant. But it's another incident. It's another happening out in the world, and a long list of things that have been happening this year. And what we do know from this year, more than any other year, I know there were some statistics that we were hearing about earlier, is that hackers had lives before the pandemic, and when they don't have lives and they're sitting at home with a bunch of boxes of pizza, they're making more stuff. And of course, we have to chase that down and we have to figure it out. And unfortunately, even those big companies out there, or even a company based out of Texas that's trying to supply for a bunch of different government agencies in this country as well as others, they have to be careful. Some of this comes down to coding, and some of this comes down to just the diversification of technology over the years. And this even includes those of us that are talking on this meeting. You have different people in cybersecurity that are actually doing different things. And of course, we all have different ways that we're defending or proactively consulting with our clients to make sure that it is something better in the future rather than having a breach or consistently experiencing breaches. So as far as a war story, I actually want to back up a couple years before we were doing a security assessment, and I had met with the point of contact with the client. We had gone over everything, and it was kind of the simple things. Security awareness was being done. There were a number of different things that they were doing as far as compliance was concerned. And so as part of the security assessment, we checked on physical controls. What do you have at the door, right? Which, of course, is very, very different in today's time and how we're working. So anyway, I walked in, I introduced myself with another name, and I said I was from IT. They didn't ask for anything. And they literally let me walk right into the server room, and I walked out of a back door after installing a box where I got to take control of several servers and get a bunch of data off of the network. And what it came back to, of course, was that human error. Even for an organization that was focused on compliance, they weren't paying enough attention to what was important. How do we protect it? And so they let me go right to the heart of their operations in an industry that relies on financial and business transactions. So that data is the most important part to what they do. So it was fun. It was nice. I didn't dress up in a costume. Unfortunately, my costumes were at the dry cleaner, so my Tony the Tiger was not there for me. But being able to walk in, plant a small device, and walk out, it's not a thrill. Some people think, oh, hey, that must be really fun. They did in the Ocean's 11 or Ocean's 12 movies. It's not fun when you're trying to protect somebody. There's an immediate concern for that. And so, yeah, I mean, there are so many different levels of cybersecurity now that we're focusing on. And that's one of my favorite stories, just it's an education of what happened on a small end, on just, do you lock the doors? Do you have a sign-in sheet? And, it really talks to, are we covering everything?
Love it, Nick. I know that's a great story and a live example of literally how cybersecurity includes so many different disciplines, including physical presence. And I know Jim Mottola has spent a ton of time in the physical presence, and we'll be getting to him with a question around how physical security plays into all of this. So Mark, I'm going to transition to you on your war story for insider risk, compliance, and data privacy.
Yeah, sure thing. I want to try to think about a story very similar to both Nick and Jim. I've got a lot of stories to choose from, but I wanted to try to choose something that was outside the normal of what you might hear from the news. And so the story I'm going to tell you a little bit about goes into the disgruntled employee and internal sabotage. And where this occurred, this was a very large Fortune 100 company. So think lots of people all around the world. And we had this employee who's kind of your average employee. They did really good work, nothing outstanding, kind of got average reviews year after year as part of their annual review process. But this employee was slowly becoming disgruntled and disfranchised because they felt that they were a top tier or a top ranking employee. They weren't an average employee, and they felt that people that were less experienced than them maybe were getting better reviews or getting put up for promotion. So over time, this employee was steadily getting disgruntled. Well, it just so happens one day this employee was out doing some searches on the internal network and happened to come across an unsecured SharePoint site that happened to belong to HR within the organization. And so this individual thought that was kind of interesting, started poking around within that site, and lo and behold, they happened to find an Excel spreadsheet that contains salary data for many of the top executives within the company. And not a good thing that you would want to have open for all employees to the company to be able to access. But in this case, it was. So this employee, being disgruntled and a little upset with the company the way they were, they thought they might perform a little sabotage by taking that Excel spreadsheet and mailing it out to a distribution list that contained a majority of the people on the company. So you can imagine, think of a company with over 100,000 people and a very large distribution list where the salary data of the senior executives to the company was shared freely throughout the company. This created quite an uproar and disruption within the company. The company actually lost several executives when they found out what their peers were making at the company due to this confidential data. This created a huge uproar and disruption and a searching and trying to find that confidential data, as we talked about earlier, and trying to lock it down. And it was a very long incident recovery process of trying to revoke access to that spreadsheet, try to revoke the emails, and try to, HR and many other organizations had to work to try to undo the damage that was done by this kind of internal data leak that occurred. So with that, kind of lessons learned on there was going back to my presentation. You have to know where your sensitive data lives and how it's created, and you need to make sure that that data is secured at birth of that data, or otherwise you can have incidents like this that occur. Everyone's always thinking about the external hackers and the people outside the company trying to get in, but some of your biggest risks are truly your insider risk within your organization.
Yeah, Mark, very good points. And of the assessments that we've worked on, I can tell you that we have found on almost every single one that people within the organization have access to almost everything, depending on the size of the organization, but they usually have access to things that they don't need to have access to, like you're mentioning, HR data, if they knew how to find it or where to go, financial data, these types of things that to do your job, you don't need access to. If they plugged around or they digged around a little bit, they'd eventually find it and could be able to share it if they wanted to. Mark, I'm going to stick with you because we have two questions in the chart around in the chat around Microsoft specific questions here. So if you see those, I'm gonna let you read them and then answer them. If not, I can read them for you and give them to you.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll start with Richard's question here on how does the Microsoft Compliance Management Platform extend to the remote environment, especially when people are working off a mix of smartphones and laptops, Android versus Apple? And should a company then be all Apple or all Microsoft? To answer that question, how we extend the compliance management platform to the remote environment is actually through our Intune tool and using MAM, which is mobile application management. This capability allows us to manage applications within devices. So when we manage applications from devices, we can do things like prevent copying and pasting inside and outsiding that application. We can manage the versioning of that application, make sure it's on the version that we want. And that's really our tool that we utilize to extend. We do support with the mobile application management. We support the Android ecosystem, and we also support the Apple ecosystem via iOS. So in supporting Android and Apple, it doesn't matter if you have a mix of those environments. Either of those are supported with the Intune MAM application that's available. And if you have any questions deeper about that, please feel free to reach out to the team here on the call, and they would be more than happy to sit down and spend some time with you, I'm sure, to go through solutions with that. The second question here is, does Microsoft Compliance Solution fully handle non-Microsoft files like PDFs, CSVs, and so on? Or are there limitations to such files? I will, as we go through the conversation here, I'll try to find a link and post it here into the chat that lists all of the files that we are capable of handling. We do support PDF files now. That was a long ongoing process with Adobe that lasted, I think, about 8 years. It was a very long time, but we've got a very close partnership with them, and we support managing PDF files, and they also support our technology within their platform now. So very glad to have that relationship finally solidified and that technology put into place. But as I said, as we go through, I'll try to see if I can find a link that does list all of the types of files that we do support. We support many files. We obviously don't support every file that's out there, but I'll try to get a list for you that shows what we do support.
Great, Mark. Thank you for those answers. Another thing is we do have a giveaway that will be announced at the end of this for some of the people that are on this call. So stay in tune for that. We're about 13 minutes away from that announcement. Jim, I'm going to kick it back to you from Nick's story. He mentioned the physical security breach that he was able to execute on as part of an engagement. And one of the questions I had for you was, how does physical security play a part in the cybersecurity conversation, and what is typically overlooked?
Yeah, so I'll go back to a story that, a phone call that I got on a Tuesday. We're going to RIF an employee on Wednesday, and we're not sure if they have access to the building. We've never done a physical security assessment. Okay, that's the kind of call I usually take and run out the door for. So let's look at, this is oftentimes these are not problems until it's a problem. And as it's very easy to look at the overall security maturity of an organization, whether it's physical or digital, when like Nick was saying, when you walk in the front door, and, lo and behold, for me, I always like to look for that room with all those wires sticking out all over the place that people just kind of call the closet. That's the server room. He's just laughing. And I have a picture of it because literally it was a mess. And, it's such an easy thing to do, not just, do something, from a digital sense, but just to pick something up and walk out the door with it. So, but then you have to look at security overall too, is that there's been a number of cases that, even workplace harassment cases where a camera would have been a wonderful piece of technology to use for evidence, and then if you look, further, how long is that information stored? Where is it? How do we get access to it? So the physical part really goes hand in hand with the digital part. And, I also say that, it's nice that if someone did like an inventory of devices, and you check that across devices that are logging into the network, there are so many simple things to do. But again, everybody here is in security and information security. For myself, working in embassies around the world, it's a whole different layer, okay, and scrutiny of everything. From a physical to a digital sense, but they are so intertwined. In every case that I've worked, whether it's a physical issue, it always comes down to a piece of information, a box, a device, and the mobile access management. That MAN product would be terrific. Because this is exactly the issues that we see with with BYOD devices and folks that are having these have email or other applications on their phones. So the physical and digital are just so intertwined now that you have to look at both from a confidentiality and protection of information standpoint.
Great. Nick, flipping over to the compliance channel again and talking in that area, which I know you like to and are a strong component of. Talk to us about the importance of not just putting a policy in place, but also having the integrity to follow and update it as well.
Well, yeah, compliance is always fun. Usually when I'm talking to clients, they hear the word compliance, they start to fall asleep. But the interesting part about compliance is there are actually aspects of compliance that can actually make an organization money. And it really does. You have to go the entire way through. Everybody here has probably at some point wanted a shiny new car. So if you went out and you bought a shiny new car and you tell all of your friends and family, hey, I have a shiny new car. Did you talk to them about the 3 hours that you spent sitting at a desk with somebody going over paperwork? No. But without that paperwork, you can't have a shiny new car. So compliance, it starts with foundational things. It starts with actually, deciding on a framework, following an umbrella compliance that includes a framework, and having those policies to continue matching and making sure that you have those controls in place. So great example, the financial industry. There are compliances that are required, and when they go out, if you let's say we're talking about a financial firm that has to go out and they're going and talking to major Fortune 500 companies and they are doing financial audits, for example, that company comes back to them and they say, hey, are you maintaining this compliancy? Here's a questionnaire. Here's all the information. We're not actually going to force you to do your own audit, but we may actually do an audit on you. And so, great example, I had a client, this is about a year ago. Hey, Nick, we have some policies that we put together. We sent it off and we are really hoping to get this contract. It was a very large contract. They said, we have the policies. They came back. They said that wasn't good enough. We want pictures. We want to know that you're actually doing this. And so when you have a policy, that states, hey, we have backups. Now we want to picture the backups. We want to picture the backups. We want to make sure that they're happening every day at a regular interval. Sounds boring, but when you come back to that vendor, when you come back to that other entity that you're trying to earn a contract, and you say, hey, I'm following compliance. I have my policies, and we have actually done everything that's within that compliance. At that point, it actually separates you from the rest of the pack. It's a question of operational maturity level. And so one of our clients, we went through, we did this, and they had their policies. They weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing. So the first year, they didn't earn that contract. The second year, they were doing what their policies were saying that they were doing. They earned the contract. They earned several more years on the contract because, hey, we have upped our game. We are doing this. And so a lot of times people associate compliance as in, okay, fine, I just have to spend money. Yes, it's the old adage, you have to spend money to make money, and cybersecurity is part of that, because if you're not defending yourself, that data, it slips through your fingers, and data is probably becoming one of the most important things that you can have when you're working in an organization. It doesn't matter what your industry is. If you don't have that data to back up whatever services, whatever goods that you're making, manufacturing, providing, it doesn't matter. If that data is gone, then you're not able to operate. So very, very important to start at the beginning with the foundational concepts, have the policies, do the score with Microsoft. That actually helps. It points to different types of things that you should have in place. And then, of course, when you're working with somebody, they can actually take you through the entire path. But it is a cycle. It will continue to update as technology updates.
Awesome. I love the impact, the business impact that you got to there on focusing on compliance, right? It's not just a cost. It can actually be used as a business advantage as well. Mark, we're coming up on the last 5 minutes here, and I'm gonna finish up with you on one on a question and then two on a product announcement that I think is very timely for what is just getting released in the news this week. So I think the question I would like to ask you, Mark, and you brought it up in your presentation, is this balance of security and productivity, and the principle of least privilege.
Yeah, sure thing. So when we talk about least privilege or the principle of least privilege, what we really mean is least privilege states that a subject should only be given those privileges that are needed for the tasks that they need to complete. So essentially, if a subject does not need an access right, they should not have that access right. And we try to govern those privileges based off of the role or role-based access. So that people in certain roles, we know that they need to have certain rights or certain privileges. So that's what we talk about when we mean the least privilege. When we get into the productivity piece of it, is occasionally people need rights that are elevated rights or elevated access to do something that's part of their job. And getting that elevated access so that, again, they can be productive in what it is that they're trying to do, we need to make sure that those people can get those elevated privileges when they need to have those elevated privileges so that they get them in time and that they have those elevated privileges just long enough for them to perform whatever action it is that they need to perform with that elevated privilege. And then we need to remove that elevated privilege as soon as they're done with those actions. And this is all called just-in-time access. And so this is all about giving you the privileges you need when you need them for the length of time you need them, removing them when they're done, and of course having all of that documented and logged for your compliance program to show that you're in compliant with the activities that you're doing. And this is all about reducing that attack surface, because elevated privileges are a privilege that attackers typically look for accounts with elevated privileges because they give them more access to more systems and the ability to get further within your system. So that's why we want to reduce that surface area by reducing privileges and applying the concept of least privileged access to users and their accounts.
Very good. And Mark, let's finalize with the product announcement around insider risk. And specifically, I don't know if everybody's followed this or read up in the news. I've read probably 6 or 7 pieces on different angles from this. But Solarwinds was a IT technology company that provides a service to about 18,000 both private businesses, nonprofit organizations, and government organizations. And they were, as I mentioned, breached by what is looking to be state actors from Russia, and it's been going on for a very long time. The insider risk piece of this, if you look into it, and not that we're here to discuss insider trading, but there is a piece of that where the CEO had sold $15 million worth of shares about a month ago, and an executive vice president sold about $1.5 million worth of shares at that same time before they announced this breach. And in almost all of these larger organizations that we see this, we see some sort of announcement around a breach, and then they go digging and they see some sort of insider trading or a sell-off of shares before the breach is announced. Mark, I know that may not exactly apply to the Microsoft product, but can you talk to us a little bit about how you guys are launching and attacking this insider risk platform?
Yeah, sure thing. So we've recently launched a product called Microsoft Insider Risk Management. And it is a Microsoft Insider Risk Management compliance solution within Microsoft 365 that helps you minimize your internal risks by enabling you to detect, investigate, and act upon suspicious activities within your organization. This product was developed within Microsoft under Brett Arsenal, our CISO, and his organization as a need to tackle insider risk within Microsoft Microsoft itself as a corporation. And what they did is after they developed this product, they went out to work with the product engineering teams to help bring this product to scale, which has now been released as the Microsoft Insider Risk Management. The inside of Insider Risk Management, you can create policies that allow you to define the types of risk that you're looking for and you want to identify. And then once those risks are discovered, it allows you to create cases that you can escalate to things such as Microsoft Advanced eDiscovery if needed, giving your analysts the ability to quickly take action when risks are found and to make sure that your users are compliant within your organizations. One of the things that the product does that might come out of the SolarWinds example is you can tie in HR or human resource systems into the Microsoft Insider Risk Management, and then that way you can see when a employee gives notice that they're leaving the company, you can go back for an extended period of time and see, well, before that employee gave their notice, did that employee do a massive download of documents or data within your company? If they did, that might be a risk of data leakage or spilling or theft of intellectual property, and you might want to know about it. And if you create a policy that says, hey, I want to know if people are doing mass downloads within, let's say, an adjustable window of 15 to 30 days of giving their notice, the tool will identify that, bring that as an alert to the attention of the administrator so that then they can go in, look at the data in a very detailed and visual way to see what has gone on, and if needed, create a case then that can be dispatched to appropriate people within inside the organization, like human resources and your legal department, to act upon that risk as once it's identified. It's a very cool tool, and it's worth looking into, and I'll post a link to it after this discussion into the chat window.
Love it. Thank you, Mark, for that. So at this point, we're at the end of the panel discussion and presentation. A lot of times we find people that'll say or have the thoughts of, this is all really great knowledge, but where do we go from here? What's the best next step? So with that, our team will be sending out a follow-up email in regards to the participants here around our technology assessment and gap analysis, where we really get to the root of a lot of the things we talked about on this call and analyzing the gaps, not only in cybersecurity, but backup and disaster recovery, as well as business continuity and defining where your data is. So with that being said, Mark, I appreciate your time. Nick and Jim, thank you as well. It's been great to have you guys on. And I would like to, finalize with two different things. We have not only the winners of our technology giveaways here, but also that Microsoft has partnered with Domain and Tier 1 on a 3-part series. So everybody that's attended today, you'll also get that second part, which will be on the whole entire Microsoft Teams and unified communication piece that they're building out. And we're actively deploying their phone systems and calling technologies all on the platform that you see here. So that will be our second one that will happen in January. So be on the lookout for that. With that being said, the winners of the 2 technology giveaways today are Jim Castellais from Tricor. Jim, are you still here? I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Jim. So our marketing team will be reaching directly out to you. Thanks for attending and joining this presentation. Hopefully you got something out of it, and we'll be in touch with your winnings.
Thank you.
And the second winner is Andrew McQuillen from the UMS Group. Andrew, are you on?
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. This is a great WebEx. Really appreciate the info.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew, for attending. Well, with that being said, from everybody at Domain Computer Services, Tier 1 Technology Partners, Porzio Compliance Services, and Microsoft, thank you all for attending this, and we look forward to seeing you again in January. See you.
To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device. To help us get the word out, share with a friend, leave a review, and check out our discussions on the web at go-domain.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.